Life is simply too short to feel like you live in a spec home, right? Instead, we believe what makes your house unique is collecting things that have some meaning. So let's talk about that and how you can get started.
Have you ever seen the movie Runaway Bride?
Who hasn't seen The Runaway Bride?
There's this scene.
Stop right now. If you've not seen it, stop.
True.
Forget about us. Watch it. I'm kidding.
There's this scene that lives rent-free in my brain forever. And she's trying to figure out who she is, and the love interest comes in and says, hey, do you realize that every time you're with a different person, you order your eggs a different way because you're trying to please them, or you've taken on parts of their personality? And she realizes that she's shifted and molded to fit the space and fit each relationship in each phase of her life, but she's never actually stopped to ask herself what kinds of eggs she really likes. So then there's a big montage and she's discovering herself, and the way that she does it is by tasting all of the eggs that there are and deciding, Benedict. I like my eggs Benedict. And to me, that's kind of what we're talking about here. We think that when you start thinking about your home, it can kind of start as a blank canvas, and you might be tempted to walk into a West Elm showroom and think this is beautiful and kind of translate that, or you take one of those IKEA rooms and then your home kind of looks like an IKEA room, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are cool places and great inspiration spots. But to me, the difference is when you start thinking about what are the things that make my heart really happy? What are the items that I just see when I'm out and about or I want to collect, and you start gathering those things and putting them around your home, suddenly it's like saying, I like my eggs Benedict. This is the kind of home that I want to be in. This is the space that makes me specifically happy. These are the things that look like me. And that's what I get really excited about. So that's what we want to chat about today.
So how exactly do you collect things, especially things that are meaningful to you? Well, really, collections happen over time. You can see behind us in our studio that we tend to collect fabrics.
I have a weakness for textiles.
Textiles is kind of a little bit of a sweet spot for both of us. Our eyes go to
Addiction, one might say.
No. It's just a nice thing that we like that shows a little bit about what we believe is important to us.
To me, I feel like the best way to go about this is starting to think about collecting things as a hobby. It's one more thing that you're always on the lookout for, you're always thinking about, and I don't know about you, but sometimes those things just happen. When you go to an antique mall and you wander around, I'm going to see things that you see different, that you don't see. And if I go with a friend to a mall, we're both picking up different things. We have our eyes on different stuff. And it comes down to the things that you love, I really love traveling, obviously. But I remember I was about 16 when I saw a photo of someone that had this wall of globes in their home. And it just struck me. And I was like, damn it all, when I'm a big adult, I'm going to have a wall of globes in my house. And then I just started seeing them everywhere. And I would go out and I'd see, fancy designer ones or ones in IKEA, but then I would find old globes in, vintage stores or antique malls. And then I started finding maps and compasses and wayfinding things, and I just got really into it. Over time, those things just are the things that I saw over and over and over again. And I think it's different. For you really love...
I love farm implements. I know that sounds kind of strange, but that's where my eye always goes.
Yes.
So if I go to an antique store, what I get fascinated by is shoe forms. And I get fascinated by farm tools.
Yeah, you love like old saws and shears.
I love it. I love pulleys. I like scales. Those are the kinds of things that always attract me. But I have other friends that like what they collect. I have this one friend that lives in Colorado, and for whatever reason, she loves giraffes. So her eyes are always going to, if she's in a thrift store or in an antique mall, she's looking for a giraffe. She's got giraffe pins, but her home, that might sound hokey, but her home is tastefully decorated with collections of very well curated giraffes. But
cares
that
what
makes
it
her
is?
happy. I wouldn't want a giraffe in my home, but it makes her happy. And that's the point. You want to start thinking about things that make you happy. A really good place to begin is just start scrolling on Pinterest and start looking around at bedrooms, living rooms, whatever it is that you want to get inspiration from. And just don't overthink it. Just start pinning things that appeal to you.
See where your eye gravitates to.
Yeah, it could be color, it could be a thing, and then you can start stepping back from that just a little bit and kind of realizing that what you really like are large scale things or something that you want, that you attracted to, or small. It'll start giving you an idea of, oh, these are the kinds of things that I gravitate towards, and then that'll inform some of the things that you can start collecting yourself.
Another way to do that is to just go into a space, wander around a mall, or even better, go to an antique mall or a thrift store and wander around and just start seeing what your eye gravitates to. I think it becomes really clear the things that you start seeing. Or maybe it's more having to do with a hobby. My brother is a writer, so he collects antique typewriters, and that makes sense for him. And I think thinking about, oh, maybe you're a teacher and you want to have a collection of vintage rulers in your home, and you go around antique malls and you start seeing them. And then it becomes kind of a hunt when you're out places or you're traveling somewhere, you start looking for them. But the biggest thing to start with is just, what do you gravitate to? And then you start getting that piece of information that you can go off of, and it becomes really fun.
So as Janelle mentioned, collecting things is, think of it as a hobby, which makes it kind of fun when you're out and about, especially if you're in a new city or you're traveling. You can start thinking about the things while you're out that kind of your eye will start gravitating to. You can look at art pieces, for example, that you might be like, oh, I always look for a watercolor because that's what my eye gravitates to, and I want to have a collection of watercolors. You could do that. Could be simple things like you're looking for a Christmas ornament because you want to have a travel tree. It can be so many different things. But once you find those things, a good place to begin also is to start bookmarking on Facebook Marketplace that you really want to be aware of that. I've started doing...
We have a whole video on Facebook Marketplace and how you can use it to find the things that you're constantly looking for, like collections that you're building. So go check out this video to go see how we use that as a strategy to keep building out our collection.
Which your point is valid, because you can start getting alerts that way, and if you don't know how to do that, we explain it all on how you go about that in the video. But I've now started setting alarms because we're starting to collect a brass menagerie of little animals, and they're harder and harder to find because more and more people like that mid-century modern. So if I'm going to estate sales, they've become pretty expensive lately. So with the alert on Facebook Marketplace, I get notified, and now we're starting to collect this really fun menagerie. I don't know what I'll do with it. Maybe I won't display it, maybe I will.
But that's a really good point of how you find a collection, because we didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to collect brass animals. We were in New York, and we were in an antique store, and it was a charity store, and we happened to find this giant brass swan. I mean, it's massive. And we just loved it, both of us. But we're like, we're in New York, we have to come back to DC. We're not going to carry this swan back on the train with us. What are we doing? So we left. And then all day long, we kept thinking about the silly swan. And finally we were like, we have to go back and pick it up. So we carried this swan in our hand luggage on the train in the rain. And now it keeps all of our napkins in our dining room. And it makes us happy every time we see it. But then once we had the swan, then as we started looking on online auctions and estate sales in different places, we kept finding other brass animals, and they kept speaking to us, and they would jump out at us. And like, well, if we have one swan, then we kind of need those swans, and now we need this heron, and now we have this fox.
And you may wonder, I don't want to go through all this, but you know what? It comes in super handy. If you don't have to display them, but if you have that collection, it comes really in handy because you were hosting a baby shower for friends, and then those brass menagerie got in the table, and so it made a beautiful table spread by simply putting these animals in various places.
I had Enchanted Wonderland, Woodland Wonderland on lock.
But see, then it brought joy to everybody, and that display that you had out didn't cost you a dime because you really weren't taking the time to create a tablescape and go, oh, I need to go out and find 10 brass animals. We were just really shopping our home and saying, what do we have available that could make this display work a little bit better? So that's kind of how you want to start thinking about collections, because that doesn't mean that you have to have a house full of crap and put it everywhere. But having access to those things helps it when you're throwing a party to make the table look a little bit more interesting. That's why you want to start thinking about how you can collect.
I think it especially becomes a useful parameter to be thinking about while you're traveling, like you mentioned. Because if you're going on a trip, knowing the kinds of things that you're looking out for, even if it's just, I know I want to have small scale artwork because I want to build a gallery wall of the places I've traveled. And we are going to have a whole other video on the things that we always buy when we're traveling. And that's really what we're talking about, is we know the things we're collecting. We always look for textiles when we're traveling because then it represents the country that we're in. And then we have this, whole collection of textiles that we can pull from or hang or do different things with. But that has become something that every time we're on a trip, we know what we're looking out for. And it becomes a really natural part of the process.
You do want to watch out for one thing. And that's that what happens when you start collecting and other people start recognizing that you start collecting something. Sometimes it can get out of hand and they'll start giving you stuff.
Oh, this is so true.
I remember when you were, I don't know, maybe 8, 9, 10, you started collecting rubber duckies. And when we'd go to a different city or whatever, we were in San Francisco, you'd pick up a rubber ducky.
It was the early 2000s. Rubber duckies were very big.
But they all had different faces and stuff. So you started doing that. And then your people around you started recognizing that you like duckies. And then all of a sudden,
I became like the rubber duck girl.
And that's the story. You don't want to be the rubber ducky girl, because otherwise what people will start doing is giving you stuff that you feel obligated to have, and you have to kind of teach people to be useful to you. And that's my husband, who's a life coach, always says, you need to help people learn how to be useful to you. So if you have people that gift you stuff, you can start telling them exactly what to do. Like, for example, with your globes, you've gotten good at it.
Yeah. At this point, I have a lot of them, which I love.
And we want more.
But you have to start getting a little bit choosy, and you have to be really careful. Like, okay, as I'm building out my collection, what are the things I'm really looking for, and what do I get specific? So for me, I'm now looking for really old globes. And so I have trained the people in my life that that's what I'm looking for, and it gives them, like, my mother-in-law is a really thoughtful gift giver, and she finds these wonderful old schoolroom globes from the 30s and gives them to me for Christmas presents and birthdays, and it is so deeply meaningful because she's seen me and she's seen the thing that I love, and she has that information about it, so she's able to add to the collection in a way that really is meaningful. And it's a way that people can give you gifts that are really special to you.
But she's not going to the Dollar Tree and picking up a bank with a world map on it.
There's a place for it.
So there is a way that you can start actually helping people understand what it is that you're collecting, so that if they want to give you a gift, they know how to buy for you. Because sometimes we get harder to buy for, especially the older we get, and we can buy what we want. We get harder to buy for. So that's when it becomes helpful to just teach somebody what it is that you're looking for, and then they can join in that journey as well.
Yeah. One more note that I think is really helpful as you start thinking about filling your life with things that are really meaningful and special to you is I think it can get easy for it to get a little precious. And suddenly you have these things, and maybe you spend a little bit more on something, or because it has meaning to you, there can be a tendency that all of a sudden you're kind of living in a museum of things you can't touch or sit on or deal with or use. And
this is not what we're talking about.
I think that can be a danger. We're not saying build yourself a museum that no one in your life can engage and feel comfortable in your home. We're saying fill your life, fill your space with things that you love looking at. And maybe it's cheap things, and maybe it's expensive things, maybe it's old things, whatever it is. I think it's important that it still becomes a place that you want to live in and you want to use, and that has to be okay.
If you're kind of still at that spot where you're like, I just don't really even know how to get started, that's really okay.
It's fine.
If you haven't taken our quiz, this may be a really good place to do that and find out what kind of adventurer you are. Because one of the things that Janelle and I have noticed is that different venturers will be attracted to different kinds of collections.
For sure.
Like, for example, if you are a global venturer, you may want to collect vintage cameras.
Or compasses
or
whatever.
or, you know, whatever, that things that
Suitcases, trunks.
the joy is in bringing things into your space that utterly delight your heart, that tap into those expressions of who you are.
Yeah.
If you're a domestic venturer, then you might want to start collecting antique linen napkins that you use.
Or cookbooks.
Or cookbooks.
Cookbooks are a great collection. That makes tons of sense.
So much fun to have a cookbook collection. It could be antique collections. It could be current collections. It doesn't matter. It's an expression of you.
Who has a kitchen who has a really cool display of vintage rolling pins in her kitchen because it makes sense, and she's in a cottage, and it's something that she collects because she loves to bake and she loves to find old biscuit recipes, and so she collects biscuit cutters and rolling pins. And that's a great expression of a domestic venture.
When we combined our households, we had so many cutting boards between the two of us that we decided to create a cutting board wall. And when people come into our kitchen, that's the one thing people go, oh my gosh. They take pictures of it. They want to start doing that in their own home. And that's what collections do. They inspire us. And every time I see that wall and I walk by it, it just fills my soul.
Yeah. If you're a cultural venture, you should probably be collecting books. You know, that seems like a no-brainer, but what kinds of books? And maybe you fill your home with art books or coffee table books. We have a whole other video that we have where we're showing the coffee table books that we have right now that we're displaying because we love collecting them. And that books are a whole other collection. That becomes that's a different way of looking at a collection that still reflects who you are and the things that bring you joy.
And if you're a soulful venture, then you may be looking for things that just nurture you. It could be color-based. It could be something like a smell, a candle.
Candles.
There's just all kinds of things that you can be thinking about. But the point is, venture out and collect things that really are meaningful to you, that bring you joy that you've brought into your home.